Hello, Whistle.
Hello.
So this is an unusual thing for me to have on my channel, but I have all kinds of people, and we have conversations, and I know that I do know you in person, and you had a project out last year. I'd love for you to give us a little background on kind of who you are and what the heck are you doing writing these songs that are being critical of all of this gender ideology that a lot of mostly women have been fighting. You're one of the few men. So I'd love you to tell the audience what's your background? What are you doing with this project?
Singer-songwriter and a musician since high school. I've also been a political activist since high school. I took up piano in high school. I also supported my teachers when they went out on strike my senior year. I got a bunch of students to go out on the picket line with them. So I've been working for social justice my whole life and always considered myself a part of the left. I've done labor organizing. I've done a lot of peace and anti-war activism. But I also, at one point, and I don't want to give too many details, but I got involved with some radical feminists. And that was very satisfying political work. And I think since then, and this is the 1980s, I have considered myself a feminist ally and tried. That's been a pretty big piece of my political identity. I hate that word identity, but we used to actually use that word without being self-conscious about it. So yeah, a longtime activist, peace, labor, women's rights. I think the thing that got me into this particular issue, because I had retired, I'd been out of the workforce, I'd been working in HR. I think had I stayed in HR another couple of years, I'd have come up right up front against this. I think I might have even been the guy who's required to train everybody in it. So I feel like I got out of the workforce in the right time, but it also meant that I was sort of oblivious. Mm-hmm. And then I heard about some feminists were giving a talk at the public library, and there was trans activists who were trying to deplatform them. And I've always been a big advocate for free speech, and that didn't sound right. I didn't like the idea that somebody was trying to silence women at of all places, the public library. Mm-hmm. So on the basis of the free speech issue, I bought tickets to the event, and that was a real eye-opener in two ways. The presentation about gender identity was really eye-opening and very informative, and the crowd outside that was hostile towards us was another real eye-opener. I'd never been on the wrong side of a picket line, if you will. And there was no conversation. There was no dialogue. They hated us. They were screaming at us. They called us TERFs. At the time, I didn't even know what that meant, but it obviously wasn't a good thing. And got threatened by these people. It was scary. It was a very scary night. The cops weren't as much help as they could have been, but they were there. And so I took a deep plunge. I started reading all these books, and I think the first thing I read was Abigail Schreier's Irreversible Damage, and I've just been reading those kinds of books for several years now. This is going on 4 years that I've been working on this issue, and I got into it on free speech, but now I see how many intertwining issues there are. Whether it's children's, basically pediatric malpractice, women's spaces. I think it's the women's spaces that boggles my mind the most, because it's so obvious when men's are in sports and men are put in women's prisons. It's like, it's outrageous just on the face of it, and that the left is seemingly turning their backs on this. I don't get it, because women's rights have always mattered, and suddenly they don't seem to anymore. And it's a real shift in the political tides that I find very unnerving.
It's interesting you bring that up. So yeah, I was thinking about the topics that, well, first, this is your second effort too. Last year in 2023, you came out or debut with what's called an EP, 6 songs, and there were 3 videos. made by YouTube creator, Skirt Goes Spinny. Out of 6 songs that you wrote, 3 of those were made into videos. And that, that brings up another level of storytelling, right? And you wrote all the material. And I know when I originally talked with you and you contacted me to see if I could help you with the recording and finding musicians and things like that, you had to get out of the geographic area where you are. And I thought about Kat Cattinson, who at the time was known as one of the prominent, outspoken, young women who was reclaiming her actual sex. And they're known as detransitioners, people that do that. And she was a vocalist before she started losing her voice. Her voice was really changing with the testosterone use and everything. And I remember telling you about that. And I know that you originally said you were going to sing everything, and she ended up singing on everything as well. And it just turned out to be such a beautiful project because, of course, one of the songs that you wrote was called Being a Woman. And it was just so wonderful, to have particularly Kat, who coming from where she came from, and to be able to sing that song. I feel like it's for sounding the alarm, that first effort that you did last year, after a career of being a regular singer songwriter, putting out a lot of albums. um for her to be able to do that is kind of like the modern day, I feel like, Natural Woman, which ironically she sang, it was one of the songs that she did after she started to detransition to get off the drugs and stuff. But you talk about the topics now with this release, which is called Did You Know? And last year, I know that a lot of people woke up and they listened to music. I know that I'd like to get into some of the responses maybe that you got about that. But I saw this one when you shared with me the music this time, and it's more an LP now because there's 8 songs. And the last song has absolutely nothing to do with what the other 7 tunes are. Very critical about, gender ideology as a theme. You're coming out more as a man, your personality in that way, that I really do hope that at some point, we're not there quite yet, but the reason you have this, you're wearing the scarf and you're with the dark glasses, is for any new people. And I say new like you've just gotten into this in the last year and a half or the last week and a half. People have to realize we're recording this right at the end of May in 2024, that this cancel culture has affected a lot of people that are critical about not just gender, but we know everything, whether it was the lockdowns or whatever. This cancel culture has really gotten a lot of people. And because of social media, I know, because I know you have to be really careful about actual identities. And in both last year's project, except for Kat Cattinson being involved and myself, I think we were the only like real names. And there were other musicians. Everybody had to sign NDAs, and the same thing happened this year. But instead of Kat, I found another vocalist that also has to remain anonymous. And there was another vocalist, another backup vocalist. He came on the scene. He has to remain anonymous. The recording engineer has to be anonymous. When people think that people are being paranoid or something, this stuff is very, very real. I got outed in 2020. So, I'm okay. I'm okay at this point, but I still have to be careful about certain things. The topics that you cover on this year's project, Did You Know? I'm going to read from the little thing that you have written, which it's the press part of the press kit, is that you are covering, wanted to see if you wanted to add anything to this. But what's funny is that you're now adding in your wife, in that Mrs. Whistle has now come in, and it's kind of cute and it's funny, but I know that she's a collaborator with you in a way, and she makes suggestions and she affects, your artistry. You said about this effort this year, Mrs. Whistle suggested I write a primer on the topic of gender identity, identifying the primary areas of concern for those less familiar with the issue. That right there are going to be people that already know a lot of the language, they know a lot of the issues, they know the struggles, and they might go, well, yeah, this is kind of, we already know that. And it's like, Yeah, but it's not made just specifically for one audience, but it is aimed at, what I get is it's really aimed at waking people up that don't know, like, that kids are being medicalized, and it's perfectly legal. And our tax dollars are covering a lot of this stuff that's going on. They don't realize you've got men and women's prisons, with this particular song, you're covering men and women's prisons, the social contagion among teens, men and women's sports, which has become a huge thing. You dare to go to autogynephilia, which a lot of people have never even heard. They don't know what it means. And then you bring up cancel culture versus free speech.
And the bridge, I think the bridge also is important in that it alludes to the social brainwashing that has normalized this thing in our culture that should not be normal.
Mhm,
The line is, you are feeling very sleepy.
mhm,
And I think the constant bombardment of uh, gender philosophy in the newspaper and the televisions all the time, every day, people who don't even know about this probably believe there are people who change sex just because it's so immersive. And so I think, yeah, I tried. It's a primer, and I thought that was a great idea. I don't know that, a lot of people have made up their minds. There are polarized camps. People will hate the song or they'll love the song, depending on where they stand on the issue. I don't know how many of those people who are on the fence are going to hear the song.
mhm,
I mean, it's kind of theoretically aimed at the people who maybe haven't heard these issues.
mhm.
Um, but I do believe that the two records both serve another purpose besides educational, and that is uh, support for the troops. Is what I think of it. Is that there are a lot of feminist activists in the trenches working on this issue day in and day out, losing friends, losing jobs, not being appreciated, parents who are losing their kids to this cult. And I think it's very helpful for them to see those concerns reflected in art. Um, and you and I, that's something you and I have in common. We understand the importance of art and culture and film in influencing people on big topics like this. And so I'm hoping, if even if I don't reach anybody and change anybody's mind, I want the people who are really working hard on this issue to feel like we got your back. The artists are there too.
Mhm. It's like with comedy. Remember how a number of people, I was one of them, got really excited when Dave Chappelle made that joke about being on J.K. Rowling's, team. He says, if that's it, saying that sex is binary, I'm team turf and whatever. And when there were only 5 of us that went to Los Angeles to help to support that idea, we knew a lot of attention was going to be happening. They were trying to get him kicked off of the special. They were trying to shut him down, and all of his comedy. They were trying to do all this boycotting of him. And when a number of us got together, I said, we have to be there and we have to have a voice in this. And one of the women said, well, what's going to be the focus? I mean, this is Dave Chappelle. And I said, cancel. This is cancel culture. Let's focus on that. And then as soon as the journalists start asking us questions, we go into it. We touched on practically every area, like you do, in this CD. I wanted to hit upon also something that, and I know we've had lots of conversations and whatnot, but the idea that there were things that you learned from putting out the first one last year, because it's the first time you put out something without your real name, and so you don't get to do the normal publicizing. And we were relying on using social media and certain contacts that we had and other friends of ours and all that, and trying to really get the interest up in this. And I think that the 3 videos, with a very popular Skirt Go Spinny and all of her many documentaries that she's made, and she still makes, was really important, because there's one thing to have a song and music to accompany the lyrics, but then to add a visual on, like what you did with the song Let Women Speak, or also known as the Ballad of Posey Parker. Once that footage came in of that mob in New Zealand, I think everybody can relate to that. And some people that never saw anything, they might go, what happened? Why were they doing that? Anybody can see the insanity of this stuff, like you brought up about it's normalized now.
I've come a long way in terms of my thinking around the album versus video, because when I made the first record, I was like, I want the record to stand on its own merits. It's, it's a record. People used to make records and they'd go home and listen to their records, and that was an immersive experience. But of course, everybody's on screens today, and yeah, we got a lot more traction from the videos than we did from the record itself in terms of views versus streams. It wasn't even close. So, and I admit that when I watch the videos, it adds a whole nother level. It's and Skirt's so good with the storytelling. She brings those stories to life, and she's got such an eye for faces, memorable faces. Her videos, I think they add an emotional impact. But I'm still a big fan of sitting in a dark room with the headphones, just listening to the song and hearing the left and the right channels and the good stereo. And, we went to a lot of trouble to make it sound good. So I hope people listen to, a good hi-fi version.
Well, this brings me to the part of, what's a man got anything to do with this? What's your skin in the dog in this fight? What do you say? Skin in the game and all that. I'd like you to talk to it, because I've had a number of conversations with very few men that have really stuck their necks out with this. I like the statement whistle that is, good men stay back so that bad men stand out. And and that's kind of like this, but have you gotten some pushback about this at all?
That phrase that I wrote about skin in the game is something someone actually wrote on Facebook to me. And it's premised on the idea that people don't do allyship, as if allyship was a new concept, which it isn't. I've, a lot of the labor organizing was not allyship. I was a working person. I was a laboring man. And so that was actually organizing with my own self-interest in mind, but also an eye towards a better society. But lots of people do work on racial justice issues. There's nothing wrong with that. To me, I feel like if you've got privilege, and I've got a lot of privilege, the only real legitimate use of privilege is to work towards ending privilege. So I leverage what I've got to try to make the world a better place, I guess. And, this is, like I said, it's such a multifaceted issue, and many of these issues are about women's rights, and some of them aren't. The free speech thing isn't strictly a feminist issue. I have been an ally to women for a long time, so that's a big piece of it. And that whole bit about men are stronger at sports, and that's why they shouldn't, they're larger and faster and bigger, and just on the whole. Well, I think that's the reason men need to be out on these picket lines defending women. I mean, you and I both know a lot of women that will stand on a street corner and give a pitch like on this topic, and very often attacked. And that's an instance where some 6-foot-tall dudes would really be helpful, So I'm like you. I wish there were more men working on this. I'm often the token fellow. If we're doing, there's some friends here. We go out to the local pediatric gender clinic, and we'll do some picketing that just educating the public who's driving by with our signs about, the kids thing. That's not strictly speaking a women's issue. Child safeguarding is everybody's job. It shouldn't be a women's issue. I think women have been left with the bulk of the child care, but men need to step up. Men need to also care about what happens to children, because half the kids are boys. There's some self-interest there. Let's get with it, guys. And, you said the last song isn't really on the gender theme. The next to the last song technically isn't either. It's a song by me to men. It's called "Listen Up, Men," and it's like, dudes, we got to do better. Really, it's me talking to men, and think that's a piece of feminism. If I'm going to be an ally, then I need to be. I can't fix men, but God, we sure could do better.
Appreciate that. This particular project also, I know that I'm really excited about it because it was something that I had wanted for last year, and I think maybe now there'll be some sales of that too. But we're so used to everything being streamed that you literally had it last year's project turned into a CD that you gave away a lot, and I know I just gave some to some people, and it wasn't listed for sale on the Bandzoogle site that you have, but maybe you'll do that now because this time you are offering, and at least within the United States, we can work out something about. I've already got somebody in Australia that says I want a copy. I said, well, I'll make sure. It gets to be expensive, but there'll be some favors I'll do, to make sure and mail out some of those. But within the United States, from the Bandzoogle site, you're going to be able to sell some of these, and it's even more of a reflection of kind of going back. I feel like it's sort of old school this time also, the way that you're releasing this, even though you did it last year, but there were only 6 songs. The whole month of June, it's like every week, 2 new songs are going to drop. Am I correct that way?
Yeah, we're calling them singles. We're calling them an A side and a B side. And of course, anybody under 30 or 40 is not necessarily even going to know what we're talking about.
Right.
So for those under 30, we used to have those 45s, and Beatles would put out a big hit, you'd buy the 45, and they'd have a B side, you'd flip it over, you get 2 songs. So that's what we're doing. There's no vinyl, but it's a way of releasing them in bits. And I think the pairings are nice. We've sort of got the pairings a little thematic. So like this single is going to be our country rock single.
What this ideology has done to the English language, and literally it's happening in law, is should be criminal. Should be absolutely criminal.
The writer, that is actually right up there, up with the most important issues to me: the destruction of the language and shared meaning. A language, we're able to have a culture because it means the same thing to everybody.
Yeah.
And this whole thing with queer theory and no definitions, it's not good for us.
A week later, one called Enemies List. Now that comes from your experience of going to this largely attended panel, right? Where the trans activists were like, didn't they number like 300 or something crazy?
I wouldn't be surprised. It was pretty massive. There was a lot of cops. They kept us separated. People got checked going in, metal detectors, and people got dragged out of the auditorium because they brought in their alarms, and it was a scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, that song is about that.
The song called the Nashville Manifesto. I remember when you first shared the music with me, and my first reaction was, oh my God, oh shit, nobody should talk about that. And for anybody that's outside of the United States and seeing this video, of course, it's about, the mass killing that went on in Nashville, Tennessee, here in the United States, by a young woman who thought she was a guy. And there's other things I won't say about the song and everything, but I know that, it's going to be controversial. It's going to be, probably, in my mind, we'll have to wait and see what happens. In my mind, this is going to be the most talked about of the whole project. So that'll be out on the second weekend. And is there anything else that you wanted to say about that?
With your assessment, I did my best to in no way glorify the killer. Their name is not in the song. I make it real clear that that's not okay. I'm definitely not. But it's a thing that happened, and I think songwriters are part journalists, and I don't think there should be topics that are like off the table. I think you should be able to talk and write about anything. And there was some stuff in there for me. you alluded to one of the issues, but I think there's a bigger kind of free speech issue, which is why does the police department and the state feel they have the right to keep that manifesto from us?
Mhm.
I think there's things in that manifesto that will be very enlightening and very eye-opening.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people don't want that out there. Uh, so that's the other issue it addresses is not just was she on testosterone,
Mhm.
also why aren't the cops just releasing the manifesto?
Yeah.
What gives them the authority to make that call?
I was thinking more Whistle too when I had that initial reaction, and I had to have big old sit down talk with myself, because I know that we're both of generation that remembers Neil Young coming out with "For Dead in Ohio," and I was, that was devastating. But again, it's like with any art form, whether it's comedy, there's such a thing as, gallows humor, where a lot of people work in hospitals and they see death all the time or suffering, and they turn things into jokes, and you think, oh my God, this is not a joke. But it's to be able to resurface a horrible crime and to turn it into a song, as like I said, that's, yeah, I thought about Neil Young's "For Dead in Ohio." That was just, I went, well, and that spread, it came into my mind recently because of all these things going on on the campuses with these protests and whatnot, and talk about bringing in the National Guard. I immediately think, oh my God, is this another, was it 1974? I mean, that was absolutely shocking.
Yeah.
But, the other thing that you're going to be coming out with then in the third week's release, the other two songs, one of them is called "Where to Find My Heart." Would you talk about what influenced what it?
Yeah, I will. There's a Substack column called Parents with Inconvenient Truths About Trans. And the people that run that Substack put together a compilation of these essays. So I have a book, 75 essays by parents whose teenage children have declared a trans identity. And while there's a sameness to all the stories, they're also each heartbreakingly unique. Um, and so I wrote a song from the point of view of the parent whose 13-year-old daughter wants to get the surgeries and take the drugs, and the anguish that the parents are in, wanting the best for their child. I think this is an important song because the mainstream narrative is the child's the hero, and if the parent doesn't affirm, they're a bigot. But when you read these essays from the parents, these parents aren't bigots. These are leftists and rightists and everything. Parents are from everything. It's not even a political thing. It's my child wants to cut a piece of their body off. My child wants to take drugs. It's horrible for the parents. So I thought that perspective really needed to be heard.
Absolutely heartbreaking. And in terms of musically, would you call that a ballad? What's the category of that? Because we didn't really talk about the musicality of the stuff, but this whole
Yeah.
CD goes, we've got soft rock, we've got more gnarly kind of rock. We've got a female vocalist who, like I said, can't be mentioned, who takes National Manifesto to church, as I say. Uh, as they say, it's like you're the father talking about this daughter, and
Yeah.
who's this
That's and
living in the house.
it was a very deliberate decision to leave that song as simple as possible. Um, there's no harmony vocals. There's there's just the four instruments. Basically, that track was taken live, except for the lead vocals, which I went back and did over. But yeah, it's a very sparse, very spare, uh, semi-acoustic. I mean, there's a drummer. It picks up a little towards the end, but it's still just acoustic guitars, and it's and I thought that's the touch that song needed. It's a really and also as a songwriter, I'm always trying to match the musicality to the song. And so I try to write in a lot of different styles, and I think I did a pretty good job of that on this record. Like you said, there's the hard rock, there's the kind of acoustic-y folk, there's more of a gypsy jazz piano tune at the end. I try to get it all over the place.
Well, this when Where to Find My Heart gets released in that third week, the B-side is Pronoun Police. And that's the one that, although you're really poking the bear around pronouns and stuff and how stupid the whole thing is, but it also, I think we all agree, those of us that have been in this fight for a while, that the whole acceptance and bending to this pronoun thing is really the gateway that can then, continue on and on. But the tone of that thing, when I heard that, I was like, all I could do was picture country western bars and line dancing. And I think it could be a real goodie for that.
That's the one song where I just basically tried to be funny, because the pronoun thing is so ridiculous. It just was begging to be made fun of, and I make fun of it day to day in my daily life anyway. So it wasn't very hard to write a song making fun of pronouns. So yeah, that's a real goofy song. There's some word puns and stuff, but and I think you'll find that one thing I love about that song is the way the musicians kind of stepped up and found that mood. And there's even like the slide guitar is semi-comic.
I was saying this about the guest vocalist who the female guest vocalist performs on 3 of these songs. You do some solo stuff, and then we did talk about Listen Up Men, which all the musicians had not done that before with you, even though you had some of the same musicians from last year, for all these men to be singing around the microphones. And I was like, this is kind of like a sea shanty in a way. It's got this feeling of, kind of like that's some old tune.
Yeah, that's a real outlier. It's I put it near the end because it's not a crafted pop song. It's 11 verses, no bridge, no chorus, just yeah. And I was sort of modeling it after some kind of an old English folk song, and I even throw in a bunch of kind of English words like cue and pub and mate and stuff like that, just to because that's the mood I got in, and it takes a very different listening mood. I find that I'm listening to the other songs and kind of pumped up, and then I get to that song and it feels like really slow. But then once you get into the mood and you just sort of settle down, it's kind of I like it now.
You talked about this before about being a male, being an ally in this whole thing, and there's something that you wrote here. I just think it's wonderful. Where you talking about this song, you said even the good men rarely take responsibility for changing society-wide patterns of male violence. This song is sung by men for men, urging them, us, to step up and be true heroes, protectors, nurturers, warriors for peace. You know how many women that have been in this fight whistle that talk like that and go to the sporting events and go to the school board meetings. We are only very recently seeing some fathers, very recently seeing fathers going to the school board meetings, guys that are getting up and reading porn and they're trying to shut them down, and they're making their points that way. But so many want men and the fathers to show up at these sporting events, like what has been happening, where the girls are just getting all of their awards just stolen out from under them.
J.K. Rowling said something very interesting about this, that there's men who will support women's rights if it also advantages them. So birth control, abortion, those are rights that women get that men will support because it helps them too. But the other rights that women want, like safe spaces in women's sports, there's nothing in it for men. So a lot of men don't even care about that. And I think, and she's saying that's how you tell the character of a man. If he's also helping women with the issues that have no personal benefit for him, then that's probably an ally.
Yeah. What do you hope at this point with the difference and the way that this particular recording is being handled? I already know that you had an interview with somebody who pitched it to a very prominent, newspaper platform, and it was turned down because you have to remain anonymous. And that's one of the reasons that we're doing this conversation right now. But we didn't do this last year, and now more people do know about you. What do you hope comes from this project that didn't happen last year?
Well, I do expect to get more exposure. We were starting from scratch a year ago. We had nothing. We didn't. We had an idea really, and that was it. And then we somehow managed to actually make the record, and we got great response. I've been laboring in obscurity for 45 years, and it's rewarding to me as a songwriter to see my music finally get an international audience. So that was very gratifying for me. I think we're going to get a lot more traction this time because we're not starting from scratch. I've got a mailing list. We've got several hundred subscribers at YouTube. We've got a publicist on board this year. We got more songs. I beefed out the record a little bit. We brought in a dedicated keyboardist who I think really adds a whole nother level to the band. We had the same players from last year, so we kind of had a rapport going. I think musically it's a slightly better record, and I also think the fact that this is it's a volatile year politically. I think people and I'm not just talking about the presidential election either. I think that this topic is very much on people's minds, except for the people who are completely oblivious. So I expect great things. I would love to see our metrics go through the roof. I think you're right about the Nashville Manifesto. If that gets the kind of support and pushback that we anticipate, that could be a game changer. I would love to take this show on the road. I don't know what that looks like, but if we build enough of an audience, why not tour with this band? We might have to put a big scrim up in the front of the stage to have us all backlit and shadowed, but that's all right.
Well, I'd like to end on this one thing, which I think is very, very sweet, and that is that when you added on an eighth song. We've talked about 7 of the songs, and you added on this 8th song. And I know I still kept saying, "Oh, this belongs on another, another release or whatever." But with like, well, if I have to stay anonymous, I'm going to bring myself out a little bit more. And what did you do? You came out with a song called "My Gal." Well, a couple of the journalists that have gotten this already ahead of time, said to me, that was out of left field. That was very cute. It was like this. I think that's something, again, it's going to warm people to you, where last year, I think that the big star factor happened was around Kat Kattinson, because anybody in this movement who knows about the detransitioners and felt so bad for her, and then we're so happy that she's reclaiming her, not just her body, but that she's worked on her voice so much, and it's absolutely stunning, and several of songs. And this time to have the to have the variety, but also what I wanted to say about My Gal is that musically it's you again. So there are a couple of songs, they're just really you. You've got the thing with a bunch of men. You have this kind of stomping line dancing song, this sort of sea shanty thing, and this ballad, a very serious ballad, the going on there with Where to Find My Heart. And what's interesting is that the guitars that comes in there, the kind of screaming guitar comes in on a couple of these. I think it's really going to surprise people, and it's very American.
And the thing about My Gal, the love song at the end, I felt, I guess when I made the first record, I assumed it was a one-off.
Mm.
And then it got all this traction, and we got, so much good positive feedback that actually there's an audience for that, right? So I was able to write to theme. Fortunately, this is a multifaceted issue that kind of supports that. There's so many things you can go get into on this. But making the second record, it was like, oh, okay, this is actually, this is a thing, this is a real thing, and we got a band, and we even sort of got a brand, if you will, like they having the woman who sings 3 songs on the record. I love that bit. We've done that on 2 records in a row. Uh, I really enjoy hearing great singers sing my material. It's very gratifying. And so I'm really happy to give space to other singers, because for me it's about the songwriting. I'm not wedded to actually delivering the song personally, but I wanted, now that Whistle's a thing and we got 2 records, and I kind of wanted the audience to, I wanted to acclimate the audience to the fact that I might throw a few personal things in there too. Maybe Whistle actually talks about more things in real life than gender ideology. Promise.
Like all of us. Yeah.
Yes.
Like all of us. It's not us. Well, thank you so much for this. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
You mentioned Kat Pattinson. I just wanted to say how great that was working with her, and that I still love what she did on that record, and really enjoyed hearing her. And plus, she did all the harmonies, and she was so prepared when she came in the studio. It was amazing. But yeah, I guess just thanks to all the people who have helped on this, most of whom have to remain anonymous, but yourself, the team, our team this year is bigger. We've grown our team, and there's a lot of people helping us, more people helping us now. And so to each of them, thank you.
There's an angel donor that the credit for her is right on the CD. If you want to see that, you're going to buy the CD. I mean, that's one way. Yeah, it's a team. I mean, it really takes a lot of people, huh?
Your role has been so important, Joey, as a co-producer. For your audience should know how hard you have worked on this. You were there in the studio and picking people up at the airport. You've been right there. It's so good. I'm so grateful to you.
So thankful that I was able to be in the studio this year, knowing last year, off at the film festival pushing Affirmation Generation and not being able to know exactly, and then just hearing your reports, you were so glowing about, you went, oh my God, about Cat and the band and the whole deal. So I think it's always an interesting journey for any artist to see this thing turn into something else. And I'm like, it's almost like I can't wait for this to be over, so you write more songs for like a Whistle 3, 3.0, and then who's going to be the vocalist, and will they be able to have their names attached, or not? And we'll see.
Yeah,
25, right?
You're such a good fit for this, because you have done a lot of music production, a lot of live music production, and but also you're so involved in this issue that, for instance, when I write that song about the parent, the parent of the teen,
yeah,
the people, you know this movement well enough to know who's got to get which song and where to pitch these things, and I that's also so useful. Thank you.
Well, this has been a pleasure, and guess what? We're just taking off now in a whole other chapter of it, right? Get it to the people.
A week from now, it's all going to be out there in public.
Okay, Whistle, we'll see you on the other side here, and let's make this thing happen and get the word out to people. Shake the trees and stop with the pronouns.
There you go. Thanks.
All right. It's great talking to you.
You too. Bye.
Hi, this is Whistle. Here's a trailer for my brand new record called Did You Know? 7 tracks of gender critical rock and roll.
Did you know they put men in women's prisons? This isn't Fox News. All these inmates who swear that now they're women. This isn't trans blues. Trans blues.
I don't care about your he's and your hims. Could give a damn about your theys and your thems. Nobody's ever heard of Z or Zim. Now who you kidding, ain't no butter that dim. When the night falls, he scratches his lady balls, but nobody near, he cracks a Budweiser light beer. When the night comes, She changed her name at school, we didn't know. By the time she told us, it blew a hole right through our family that day. She told us she's a boy, and she's always felt that way.
She's avenging something she doesn't understand. Then the cops came and the shots rang. Things really got out of hand. She wrote the Nashville Manifesto. And though she's dead, the words she said we'll never know.
Listen up, men, I've got stories to tell, told by our fathers and we learned so well. Sung round the hearth fire, we're under their spell. Listen up, men, we've got myths to dispel.
Make your case. Not a good way, not a good way. 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 Not a good way, not a good way.
I definitely want to do that again. I didn't know where she was going.